Most relationships don't fail because people stop loving each other. They fail because people stop showing up with the effort, honesty, and presence that love requires. In the beginning, everything feels effortless, conversations flow, appreciation comes naturally, and both people try because they want to. But over time, many forget that connection needs nurturing. They stop communicating with intention. They stop listening deeply. They stop expressing gratitude. They start assuming instead of asking, reacting instead of understanding, and drifting instead of reconnecting. Relationships don't crumble overnight. They erode slowly when consistency fades and comfort replaces effort. Another reason most relationships fail is unspoken expectations. People carry their past hurts, fears, and insecurities into new connections without realizing how much influence they still have. Instead of communicating needs clearly, they hope their partner will magically understand. Instead of setting boundaries, they tolerate what bothers them until resentment builds. Instead of admitting their vulnerabilities, they hide them, hoping to appear strong or easy to love. But love cannot thrive where truth is absent. Unspoken needs turn into silent frustrations, and silent frustrations create emotional distance that becomes harder to bridge with time. Many relationships break because one or both people try to change the other instead of understanding them. They fall in love with potential, not the person standing in front of them. They expect someone to think, feel, or behave exactly like they do, forgetting that real love honors individuality. When differences arise, some choose criticism over curiosity. Instead of trying to see through each other's eyes, they judge, blame, or withdraw. Relationships fail, not because people are different, but because they resist learning how to grow through those differences. Ego plays a huge role in the downfall of many relationships. The need to be right becomes more important than the need to understand. Pride overshadows vulnerability. Apologies become rare because admitting fault feels like losing. But relationships aren't battles, they're partnerships. Every win against your partner is actually a loss for the relationship. When ego leads, connection suffers. When vulnerability leads, understanding grows. Another silent killer of relationships is emotional neglect. Not the absence of grand gestures, but the daily lack of presence, no longer checking in, no longer celebrating each other, no longer offering comfort or support. Love fades when it stops being expressed. People begin to feel unseen, unheard, or unappreciated, even if the love is still there. And when emotional needs go unmet for too long, distance begins to replace closeness. But perhaps the biggest reason relationships fail is that people stop growing together. Growth is constant, your mind shifts, your goals evolve, your desires change. When couples don't communicate their growth or make room for each other's evolution, they slowly drift apart. What once aligned no longer fits, not because the relationship was wrong, but because the effort to adapt was missing. Successful relationships aren't about staying the same, they're about growing in the same direction, supporting each other's evolution, and choosing each other again and again. Relationships thrive when effort continues long after the honeymoon phase fades. They thrive when communication stays honest, when appreciation stays alive, when understanding replaces judgment, when presence replaces distraction, and when growth is embraced rather than feared. Love isn't maintained by chance, it's sustained by intention. And when two people choose to show up consistently with patience, honesty, vulnerability, and commitment, that's when relationships don't just survive, they deepen in ways that make every challenge worth it. Relationships also fail because of unspoken expectations, the quiet assumptions people carry inside them while hoping their partner will somehow read their mind. Instead of expressing what they truly feel, want, or need, they stay silent, believing that love means automatic understanding. They wait for their partner to notice their hurt without explaining what caused it. They hope their partner will guess their desires without ever verbalizing them. They expect emotional support without asking for it. And while these expectations might seem harmless at first, they slowly create emotional tension. Silence doesn't stay silent, it grows into frustration. That frustration becomes resentment. And resentment is one of the fastest ways to create distance in a relationship. People often avoid speaking their truth because they fear conflict, rejection, or disappointment. They worry that expressing a need will make them look demanding or overly sensitive. They fear that voicing their emotions will create an argument or expose vulnerability. So instead, they keep everything inside, thinking they are protecting the relationship from tension. But in reality, they are planting seeds of misunderstanding. When your partner doesn't know what you need, they cannot show up for you in the ways you hope for. And when they don't meet those unspoken expectations, you start to feel unseen or unimportant, even though they never had a fair chance to understand what you were silently asking for. Unspoken expectations create invisible walls. One partner begins to withdraw emotionally because they feel disappointed. The other senses something is wrong but doesn't know what it is. Both people start reacting to assumptions instead of reality. A simple unmet need becomes a source of conflict. A minor misunderstanding turns into an argument. Emotional distance slowly replaces closeness, and all of it could have been avoided with one honest conversation. But because many people struggle to communicate directly, they cling to the hope that someone who loves them should automatically know what they are thinking. The truth is, even the most loving partner isn't a mind reader. Love doesn't grant psychic abilities, it requires communication. Healthy relationships require a level of openness that can feel uncomfortable, especially for people who grew up believing that expressing feelings is a burden. But sharing your truth is not a burden, it's a bridge. When you express your thoughts with honesty and kindness, you allow your partner to understand you better. You give them the chance to meet your needs, to support you, and to love you in the way you desire. Communication is not about complaining or demanding, it's about connection. It's about saying, this is what I feel, or this is what I need, in a way that invites understanding rather than conflict. Without open communication, people start making assumptions. One partner thinks the other doesn't care, when in reality, they simply didn't know. One believes the other is distant, when in truth, they were just unaware. Small moments of confusion stack up like bricks between them, forming a wall neither intended to build. And over time, the emotional weight of these misunderstandings can become too heavy to carry. Many relationships end not because of a lack of love, but because the love was never given the space to be expressed clearly. Honesty doesn't mean harshness. It doesn't mean unloading emotions recklessly or blaming your partner for everything you feel. It means speaking gently, sharing openly, and being willing to listen just as deeply as you speak. It means saying what your heart needs without expecting the other person to guess it. It means trusting the relationship enough to be vulnerable. When both partners practice this kind of communication, misunderstandings don't pile up. Instead, they become opportunities for closeness. Each conversation becomes a chance to understand each other more deeply. What makes communication powerful is that it prevents small issues from turning into major problems. Instead of letting resentment build in silence, you allow clarity to take its place. Instead of withdrawing emotionally, you create space for connection. Instead of assuming the worst, you uncover the truth. And most importantly, you build a relationship where both people feel safe expressing themselves. Safety and trust come from knowing that your words matter, that your needs won't be dismissed, and that honesty is welcomed rather than feared. When two people are willing to share openly, the relationship becomes stronger, not weaker. Vulnerability becomes a tool for growth rather than a source of conflict. The connection becomes more genuine, more resilient, and more fulfilling. Communication is not just a skill, it's an act of love. It shows commitment, intention, and respect. The more you practice it, the more deeply you understand your partner and the more deeply they understand you. And in that mutual understanding, relationships thrive. Another reason relationships break is the desire to change the other person. This is a trap that many people fall into without realizing it, and it can quietly erode the foundation of even the strongest connection. At the start of a relationship, there is often excitement, admiration, and a sense of possibility. You see the potential in your partner, the qualities they could develop, the habits they might improve, the ways they could grow, and it's easy to become infatuated with what they might become rather than who they already are. But love is not a project. It is not about taking someone as they are today and constantly trying to mold them into what you imagine would be perfect. When you fall in love with potential instead of reality, you set yourself up for disappointment, frustration, and conflict. Expecting someone to think, feel, or behave exactly as you do is another subtle form of trying to change them. You may not even notice it at first. Perhaps you become annoyed when your partner handles stress differently, reacts to situations in a way that doesn't align with your approach, or expresses themselves emotionally in a way that feels foreign to you. Instead of accepting these differences, many people try to correct them. They offer advice, critique habits, or nudge their partner toward their version of better. Even well-intentioned suggestions can carry an underlying message. You aren't good enough as you are. You need to change to fit my world. Over time, that message chips away at intimacy. The person who's constantly being shaped loses the sense of freedom and authenticity that initially drew their partner to them. And the one doing the reshaping often feels frustrated that their efforts don't produce immediate results, deepening tension further. It's important to recognize that love thrives on acceptance, not pressure. True connection does not require someone to fit a mold. Differences are not problems to fix. They are opportunities to learn, grow, and expand your understanding of the world. Every person brings unique perspectives, habits, and ways of interacting into a relationship. When differences are respected and understood rather than corrected, they enrich the relationship rather than weaken it. Trying to change someone is essentially saying, I value my vision of you more than I value you. And that message, no matter how subtle, creates distance. Connection cannot flourish where acceptance is lacking. Many relationships fail because partners fail to separate influence from control. Influence happens naturally. When two people share a life, they inspire each other, learn from each other, and grow together. But control is the imposition of your will on someone else's personality, habits, or emotions. When you shift from influence to control, you undermine trust and create resentment. The very act of trying to change someone communicates dissatisfaction with who they are, even if you frame it as love or concern. Over time, repeated attempts to control the other person can make them feel trapped, unheard, or unappreciated, eroding the emotional intimacy that sustains a relationship. Understanding differences rather than correcting them also requires patience and empathy. It means stepping back and asking yourself why a particular habit or reaction bothers you. Is it truly harmful, or is it simply different from your way of thinking? Can you learn from it, adapt to it, or accept it without judgment? When you approach differences with curiosity instead of criticism, you shift from a mindset of control to a mindset of connection. You create space for your partner to be authentic, and in return, they are more likely to reciprocate by honoring your individuality as well. Connection grows when both partners feel seen and accepted for who they are, not for who they are expected to become. Every human being carries a mix of strengths, flaws, quirks, and complexities. The beauty of a healthy relationship lies in embracing that mix, celebrating the uniqueness, and nurturing a partnership where growth happens naturally, not through coercion. When you let go of the need to change your partner, you allow both of you to thrive in your full authenticity. The relationship becomes a safe space for mutual growth, learning, and support, rather than a source of pressure and frustration. The desire to change someone is often rooted in fear of losing control, fear that your needs won't be met, or fear that the relationship won't survive as it is. But the antidote to this fear is acceptance. Accepting your partner as they are while maintaining your own boundaries and standards creates a balance where love can flourish. Differences no longer feel threatening, they feel enriching. Growth is no longer forced, it emerges naturally. When acceptance replaces the desire to change, relationships gain resilience, depth, and lasting intimacy. Ultimately, connection grows not by molding someone into your vision, but by understanding, respecting, and celebrating the person they already are. Ego destroys what love tries to build in subtle yet profound ways. At first, it may seem harmless, even protective, a shield that keeps you from being hurt, a mechanism to maintain control, or a way to assert your perspective. But when ego takes precedence over connection, it slowly undermines the very foundation of intimacy. Love requires vulnerability, empathy, and understanding, and ego often stands directly in the way of all three. It convinces you that being right matters more than being connected, that winning an argument is more important than being understood, and that protecting pride is more valuable than admitting mistakes. Over time, these patterns erode trust, weaken emotional intimacy, and create distance that is difficult to bridge. One of the most common ways ego manifests in relationships is through the need to win. When disagreements arise, people with unchecked ego often treat the conversation as a competition rather than a dialogue. The goal shifts from mutual understanding to proving a point. They focus on defending their position, collecting evidence to justify themselves, and ensuring they come out on top. In doing so, they fail to listen. They fail to see the other person's perspective. They fail to acknowledge feelings that matter. Arguments become battles, not discussions, and the relational energy shifts from cooperation to conflict. Even if the person wins the argument, the relationship suffers because emotional connection and trust are sacrificed for the illusion of victory. Another way ego sabotages love is through the fear of being wrong. Pride convinces people that admitting mistakes is a sign of weakness, that acknowledging shortcomings diminishes their value. This fear of vulnerability keeps apologies rare and shallow. When someone refuses to apologize because they want to protect their image, unresolved tension builds. Small hurts compound into larger emotional distance. The other person begins to feel unheard, unvalued, and unsafe sharing their own vulnerabilities. Love requires honesty, humility, and the courage to admit when you're wrong, yet ego convinces you that self-preservation is more important than emotional connection. Ego also creates emotional walls. People build defenses to protect themselves from perceived attacks, criticism, or rejection. These walls may appear as sarcasm, defensiveness, stonewalling, or withdrawal. While these behaviors may shield the ego from temporary discomfort, they block intimacy and trust. Your partner sees your distance, misinterprets your silence as disinterest or contempt, and responds with their own walls. A cycle forms. The more ego-driven the defense, the greater the emotional chasm. Over time, the space between partners grows, not because love has vanished, but because ego has crowded out empathy and understanding. When ego dominates, empathy suffers. Empathy requires openness, curiosity, and the willingness to see the world from another person's perspective. But the ego-centered mind is focused on itself, on its own feelings, its own pride, its own need to be right. In this state, it becomes nearly impossible to connect emotionally. Misunderstandings multiply because each partner interprets the other's words and actions through the lens of ego. Defensive reactions replace compassionate responses. Miscommunication escalates into conflict. Emotional distance grows while the capacity for intimacy diminishes. Relationships do not collapse because of love lost. They collapse because the ego obstructs the pathways that love needs to thrive. Ego also impacts the ability to communicate constructively. Conversations are no longer about connection or problem solving. They become arenas where points are scored, dominance is asserted, and validation is sought. Subtle forms of control emerge, interrupting, dismissing, or talking over the partner. Passive-aggressive behaviors and resentment can replace honest dialogue. Over time, even loving intentions are filtered through the lens of self-protection and pride, reducing the quality of interaction. Love, which flourishes on openness and understanding, struggles to survive in a space dominated by ego-driven communication. Finally, ego blocks growth. Relationships require evolution, compromise, and learning from mistakes. But ego resists change because it fears vulnerability and discomfort. It convinces individuals that their way is the only way, that admitting fault is unacceptable, and that adjusting behaviors signals weakness. When ego dictates actions, personal growth and relational growth are stifled. Couples become stuck in patterns of blame, defensiveness, and control. Intimacy becomes transactional rather than genuine. Emotional safety erodes, and with it, the potential for lasting connection diminishes. The antidote to ego is humility, self-awareness, and the willingness to prioritize love over pride. It means listening more than defending, understanding more than proving, and connecting more than controlling. It requires the courage to apologize, the patience to empathize, and the grace to accept imperfection in yourself and your partner. When ego takes a back seat, communication becomes authentic, emotional walls come down, conflicts transform into conversations, and relationships regain the intimacy and trust that allow love to flourish. Love thrives not in the absence of disagreement, but in the presence of empathy, understanding, and mutual respect, qualities that ego often obscures but can be restored through conscious awareness and intention. Many relationships fail not because love is absent, but because emotional neglect gradually creeps in unnoticed until the connection has been weakened. In the early stages, love often feels abundant, visible in every gesture, conversation, and touch. Partners communicate frequently, listen attentively, and show care in small, meaningful ways. But as time passes, life grows busy, routines become familiar, and the initial excitement fades. People get caught up in work, responsibilities, social obligations, and the daily grind, often assuming that the relationship will sustain itself without deliberate effort. This assumption is one of the quietest and most damaging forms of neglect, because the bond is left untended and emotional closeness begins to fade. Emotional presence is more than being physically near someone. It is about being attentive, engaged, and attuned to their feelings, needs, and experiences. When partners stop actively showing care, Even unintentionally, the other person begins to feel invisible or unappreciated. Affection that was once natural compliments, hugs, verbal appreciation, or simple check-ins may diminish or disappear entirely. Support becomes irregular rather than consistent. Small acts of love that reinforce connection, trust, and intimacy slowly fade. The heart, even while standing next to someone, can begin to feel profoundly alone. This kind of loneliness is subtle but powerful. It does not arise from overt conflict, but from a lack of emotional investment, leaving one partner yearning for connection that no longer feels reciprocal. Over time, emotional neglect accumulates like invisible cracks in a structure. Small moments of indifference or distraction may seem inconsequential at first, but their effects compound. When one partner consistently fails to acknowledge achievements, celebrate milestones, or respond to emotional needs, a sense of disconnection grows. Gratitude goes unexpressed, appreciation is taken for granted, and support that once felt reliable now feels uncertain. The absence of these emotional reinforcements can create insecurity, anxiety, and resentment. A partner may begin to question whether they are loved, valued, or truly seen, which can lead to withdrawal, frustration, or detachment. Complacency often disguises itself as stability. People may believe that because the relationship has endured for years, it no longer requires effort. This false sense of security can be dangerous because love is not self-sustaining. It needs regular attention, reinforcement, and nurturing. Emotional presence is like watering a plant. Without consistent care, the plant weakens, loses vibrancy, and may eventually wither. Similarly, without daily expressions of care, connection, and engagement, emotional intimacy deteriorates. Distance grows quietly, almost imperceptibly, until it becomes a significant barrier that is difficult to bridge. Neglect also affects communication. When emotional needs are ignored, partners stop sharing their thoughts and feelings as openly. One person may hesitate to express concerns, knowing they may be met with distraction or indifference. Conversations become superficial, focusing on logistics rather than connection. Important discussions about hopes, fears, and desires are postponed or avoided altogether. Over time, the relationship becomes more transactional than emotional, centered on routines rather than intimacy. The heart's yearning for connection remains unfulfilled, leaving one or both partners feeling unsatisfied despite the outward appearance of stability. Addressing emotional neglect requires intentional effort. It begins with awareness, recognizing that love is not just an abstract feeling, but a daily practice. Partners must consciously choose to be present, attentive, and expressive. Simple gestures, like asking about each other's day with genuine interest, offering words of affirmation, providing support during difficult moments, and showing appreciation for even small acts, can restore emotional closeness. Regular acts of affection, both verbal and physical, remind each partner that they are valued, seen, and loved. Emotional investment is not a one-time effort, but a continuous commitment that strengthens the bond over time. Sustaining love also means prioritizing connection even when life becomes overwhelming. Busy schedules, stress, and responsibilities are unavoidable, but they should not replace intentional care. Emotional presence requires consistent attention even in small ways. Listening without distraction, offering empathy during challenging moments, celebrating accomplishments, and maintaining routines of affection that reinforce intimacy. These actions signal to your partner that they matter, that the relationship is a priority, and that love is an active, living practice rather than a passive feeling. When both partners invest in emotional presence daily, they create a resilient foundation capable of weathering challenges and deepening intimacy over time. Ultimately, relationships thrive when emotional care becomes habitual, not incidental. Love is not simply a feeling to be experienced, but a practice to be maintained. Neglect is rarely intentional, but it is destructive, quietly eroding connection and intimacy. By consistently showing up emotionally, expressing appreciation, maintaining affection, and supporting one another, partners prevent distance from growing and keep the relationship alive. Emotional presence is the invisible thread that holds love together. When it fades, even the strongest feelings can feel absent. But when nurtured intentionally, it creates a connection that is enduring, fulfilling, and deeply satisfying. The final reason most relationships fail is that people stop growing together. Life is an ever-changing journey filled with new experiences, challenges, and opportunities that shape who we are. Over time, personal growth is inevitable. Our dreams shift, our priorities evolve, and our mindset transforms. What we wanted in our 20s may not hold the same importance in our 30s or 40s. What once felt like a shared vision may no longer align with the direction one or both partners are moving toward. This natural evolution, if not navigated consciously within the relationship, can lead to a slow, almost imperceptible drifting apart. Many couples fail not because they stop loving each other, but because they stop consciously choosing to grow together alongside the inevitable growth of life itself. When partners cease to communicate their personal growth and evolving priorities, distance begins to form. One partner may discover new interests, values, or ambitions, but if these are not shared openly, the other remains unaware of the changes taking place. Over time, this lack of communication can create a feeling of disconnect. The relationship that once felt alive and dynamic begins to feel static, even confining, as if the people within it are moving at different speeds or in different directions. The absence of dialogue about growth and transformation leaves assumptions to fill the gaps, assumptions that often breed frustration, misunderstanding, or feelings of neglect. Resistance to each other's growth is another critical factor. Sometimes, one partner may feel threatened by the evolution of the other. Perhaps a career change, a new hobby, or a shift in worldview challenges the established balance of the relationship. Instead of supporting and celebrating this growth, one may respond with criticism, dismissal, or subtle attempts to maintain the status quo. These behaviors stem from fear of change, fear of losing control, or fear of being left behind. When one partner resists the other's growth, the relationship becomes a battleground of stagnation versus evolution. Love alone cannot sustain a partnership if it is unwilling to embrace the changes that life inevitably brings. Growth is not a threat, it is a necessary part of life, and therefore a necessary part of sustaining a meaningful connection. Successful relationships recognize that growth is not an individual journey but a shared one. Couples who thrive understand that each partner's evolution can enrich the relationship rather than diminish it. They make a conscious choice to adapt alongside each other, to celebrate changes, and to find alignment in new ways. This doesn't mean ignoring differences or pretending everything is seamless. It means approaching growth as a collaborative process. It requires curiosity, empathy, and a willingness to adjust expectations while honoring each partner's individuality. In this dynamic, each person's personal development becomes a shared victory, strengthening the emotional bond rather than weakening it. Another aspect of growing together is maintaining a mindset of learning and exploration. Relationships can become stagnant when partners assume they already know everything about each other. People change over time, and curiosity is essential to keep the connection vibrant. Asking questions, sharing experiences, and supporting each other's evolving goals creates an environment of mutual discovery. This intentional engagement ensures that even as life brings new challenges or pressures, the relationship continues to feel alive and relevant. Couples who stop growing together often replace curiosity with complacency, assuming familiarity is enough, only to find that comfort without growth leads to disconnection. Emotional intellectual alignment also plays a significant role in shared growth. As individuals evolve, their perspectives, interests, and emotional capacities shift. Couples who navigate this successfully make space for differences while seeking common ground. They learn to negotiate evolving priorities, adjust routines, and redefine shared goals without sacrificing individual growth. When partners fail to engage in this process, resentment and frustration can accumulate. One partner may feel unsupported or misunderstood, while the other may feel constrained or unappreciated. The subtle drift that begins with minor misalignments eventually becomes a chasm that neither partner can easily bridge. Ultimately, thriving relationships are not about maintaining sameness. They are about intentionally choosing each other through every phase of change. Love is not static, and neither are people. Those who remain connected over the long term understand that a healthy partnership requires continuous effort, conscious communication, and a shared commitment to growth. They see each other's evolution as a source of inspiration rather than a threat, and they actively engage with each other's journey, finding ways to align paths even when direction or priorities shift. In this way, relationships become a space where both individuals can flourish, supported by mutual understanding and shared purpose. When couples stop growing together, the relationship can become a reflection of what was rather than what is possible. Stagnation breeds dissatisfaction, disconnection, and eventual decay. Conversely, when growth is embraced, the The relationship becomes a living entity, dynamic, evolving, and resilient. Partners who commit to learning, adapting, and supporting each other's evolution experience a bond that deepens over time, creating a shared life that is richer, more meaningful, and capable of weathering the inevitable challenges of life. Love in this context is not just an emotion, but an active choice. A choice to evolve together, to support each other's growth, and to navigate the journey of life as a united yet ever-evolving team.